This video contains examples of factoring trinomials that are a little bit trickier than the ones in the prior video. In this video, we're not going to have just an x squared for our first term, and so these can be a bit more challenging. There are lots of ways and techniques to use to factor these. However, your factoring them is fine by me as long as you understand what you're doing. For the purpose of this video, we are going to focus on a technique called the AC method, and we are going to use that to do our factoring. In example 1, the first thing I notice is that I have a GCF. And factoring out a GCF is the first step that we are going to do in all these problems if we can. That's true for all factoring. So in this one, I think I can pull a 2, and it looks like I've got a y in everybody as well. So I'm going to pull a 2y out just to get started here. That would leave me with 4x squared minus 9x plus 2. Now when I get ready to factor this, I notice this one's a bit more challenging because this is not just an x squared. It has a coefficient of 4. So when that happens, we're going to use the AC method. A means the first term inside of the parentheses, and C means the third term. So we're going to take this coefficient of 4 and multiply it with this last coefficient or last constant, which is a positive 2. And we're just going to take that over here to the side and write out that we took 4 times 2 to give us 8. Now it's a positive 8, and I encourage you to write that there because that will help us with our factoring. So I'm looking for two things that multiply to positive 8. Now if it's going to be a positive 8, we've seen this before, that means same signs. They're either both positive or both negative. And in this case, my middle term is a negative 9x. So that tells me over here, these are going to both be negative. So I'm looking for things that multiply to 8. It's got to be 1 and 8 or 2 and 4. And to get that 9 in the middle, I think I'm going to need this 1 and 8. And since the signs match, we don't have to worry about where we're putting those in. I'm just going to put in my 1 and my 8. Now, those are not the factors for our trinomial, but we're going to use those to help us factor the trinomial. First things first, this GCF can be kind of cumbersome and get in the way. So I'm going to take this guy and just bring him down here because I know he's going to be in my answer. I'm looking for a final answer that looks something like this. We've just got to fill in the pieces. What we're going to do is take this negative 9x and split him up into two terms using the negative 1 and the negative 8. So first, the 4x squared is going to stay put. And then I'm going to take my first term from over here, negative 1, and make this negative 1x. And the second piece is going to be from that negative 8, so negative 8x. Then I still have my plus 2. So again, in math, the plan is whatever we write on one line has to be the same as the other. So if you were to simplify this, we would still get back to this. I've just taken this negative 9x and broke him into two pieces, negative 1x and negative 8x. But what that allows me to do is use something called factor by grouping. We've seen this before. Anytime you see 4 terms, we're thinking grouping. In the first group, I can pull an x, and that would leave me with 4x minus 1. In the second group, I can pull a 2, but be careful. If I pull a 2, it's going to leave this as a negative 4x, and that's not going to match. So instead of 2, I need to pull negative 2. When I pull that negative, it's going to change everybody's sign. So this is now positive, and this is now negative. 2 out of 2 leaves me with a 1. Those guys match, so we're in business. The GCFs were x and negative 2, so x minus 2. And my matchy guys are 4x minus 1. Here is your factored form of that trinomial. Don't lose that GCF. He can get kind of messy in the middle, so that's why I always just kind of take him here and bring him down so I don't lose him. And then this binomial times this binomial would give me this trinomial in here. Let's practice another one of those. So let's see, GCF first. I think I've got something here. I think 3 goes into all of those, and you notice how they all have A's and B's, so let's pull all that stuff out. I think we can pull 3, just 1A, because that last term only has 1, and 1B. And left then would be 15A squared minus 11A plus 2. Now again, I know this is going to be a tricky one because this is not an x squared, or in this case an a squared. It's got a coefficient out front. So I'm going to use that AC method. I'm going to take this a times this c, a being the first term, c being the third. And we're just going to come over here and write the answer to that. So 15 times positive 2 is going to give me a positive 30. So we're looking for 2 things that multiply to a positive 30. Because it's a plus in the back, I know we've got same signs, but let's see here. I've got a negative 11a in the middle, so that tells me they're both going to be negative. So things that multiply to 30. So I'm looking for 1 and 30 maybe, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. You don't have to write this list out. If when you look at it, you just know it, that's great. You don't have to write the list out, but the list can help if you're stuck. I'm looking to get to an 11 in the middle, so I think I need this set right there. So we need a 5 and a 6. So now I'm going to come back over here and break this guy up into negative 5a and negative 6a. Now I've got this GCF, and so he doesn't cause havoc and craziness. I'm going to go ahead and just bring him down. I know it's going to be 3ab times a binomial times a binomial. So let's find those binomials. We'll come back up here. I'm going to rewrite this, but instead of negative 11a, I'm going to use that negative 5a and negative 6a. And you can put these in any order. It doesn't matter as long as the signs are in the right spots. Now that we have 4 terms, we can use grouping. So in the first group, I think I can pull a 5 and an A. If I pull a 5A out, that's going to leave me with 3A minus 1. In the second group, it looks like I can pull a 2. But be careful. If I pull a 2, that's going to leave me with a negative 3A. And a negative 3a would not match. So when everybody's signs are jacked up, that means we need to pull the negative. So I'm going to pull negative 2, not just regular 2. That's going to change this to a positive 3a. And since this one was positive, he's now negative, and 2 out of 2 would leave me with a 1. They match, so we're in business. So the first set is 5a minus 2. And the second, the matchy guys, 3a minus 1. And again, we've talked about this, but this is all multiplication down here in our answer. So it doesn't matter the order you do it in. If you had 3a minus 1 and 5a plus 2, that's also correct. But you have to have the 5a and the negative 2 in the same set, and the 3a and the negative 1 in the same set together. But you could have them reversed. That is the factored form for that trinomial. Let's try one more. I don't see a GCF. There's a bunch of Y's going on over here. Don't panic about that. But see how this guy doesn't have a Y, so I can't pull the Y's. I got some 4's, but that's not going to work here. So I don't think I have a GCF. It does have a coefficient in front of the x squared, so that tells me we're probably going to need to do some grouping in the AC method. Don't panic about this. We're going to be able to work with it as we go. Let's start by taking A times C, so 4 times negative 3, so that's going to give me negative 12. I'm looking for 2 things that multiply to negative 12. If it's a negative, I know I've got one positive and 1 negative. Things that multiply to 12. So if you need the list, let's think through that. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. I think that's it. And we're looking for a middle term of 4, negative 4 particularly. So over here, the only place I can see a 4 happening would be right here. So let's see, 2 and 6. These are different signs, so where I put them matters. Think about what do we need so that we end up with a negative 4. If I'm going to end up with a negative 4, the bigger of those numbers has to be negative. So this is going to have to be my 6 that's negative, and the 2 is going to be positive. So I'm going to come back over here and break this guy up like we've been doing, starting with my 4x squared. Now normally we would break it up into like 2x and negative 6x. But in this case, I don't have an x term in the middle. I have an xy term. So when I break him up, I have to have xy terms. So this is now going to be positive, and we're pulling the 2 in. So 2, but not just x. This guy has to have an xy and a negative 6. So negative 6xy, and then minus 3y squared. Remember, this line has to be equal to this line. If I simplify this line here, I would be putting these two terms together, and it would get me back here. Since this is some xy's, these guys have to be some xy's. And now we can do our grouping, and it's going to take care of that funky y that we all panicked about a minute ago, all on its own. First group, I can pull a 2 and an x out. That's going to leave me with 2x plus y. Second group, they're both negative, so I know I'm pulling the negative. 3, and they both have y's, so I'm going to pull 3y out. That's going to leave me, now pulling the negative changes everybody to positive. It's going to leave me with 2x plus, and this guy's going to have a y left because it was a y squared. They match, we're in business. GCF guys and matchy guys. Here is the factored form. Don't let this y squared throw you off. Just keep doing the same process you've done for all the others, but you have to notice this term right here when you break him up. If he's xy's, then these have to be xy's. Before, this was like usually just an x term, and we'd break him up into x terms.